Hello, and welcome back to the Nourished with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I hope you're having a great Wednesday, or whenever you're listening to today's episode. I'm going to say the disclaimer that I feel like I hear every podcaster do, which I'm like, I can't tell a difference, but I am sick. So if I sound sick, that is definitely what you hear. I actually listened to an episode, this would have been years ago, and it was Emma Chamberlain, if you know who that is, and she was making fun of how people always feel like they have to give the disclaimer that they're sick, when in reality, like, the person listening doesn't probably really care, nor can they tell a difference. But just put that out there. I feel like there's definitely been something going around our family. It started with my husband. He was gone in Chicago. He came home. I fended it off for about a week. And then this weekend, it started feeling pretty crummy. And then now my parents, I think, are kind of getting it. And I feel like, I was thinking about this the other day, there was honestly kind of the perfect space of time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because I feel like we all maybe got exposed to more people and some sicknesses that we aren't typically exposed to, especially with us, that my husband and I both work from home. But then we have a full 2.5, 3 weeks before we really start Christmas festivities for people to get it, get over it, and then hopefully it's all out of our system by the time we get to Christmas. And it really just hasn't had the chance to cycle back around. So outside of that, kind of how I've been working to, and I think this is important to share because I recorded a podcast episode, this would have been, I don't know. If you go back, you'll see it's like winter remedies and things that you can do in the winter to prevent yourself from getting sick. And I will say that I was telling Nathan, I'm like, until you traveled for work this year, I really hadn't been sick for a very, very long time. Not obviously probably his fault, just how the cards fall sometimes. But I feel like how I really have supported my body this time is in the morning. And this makes a huge, huge difference, especially if you have congestion or a sore throat, is I've been doing 4 ounces of tart cherry juice with 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar, the unpasteurized raw stuff. I can't remember what the brand is, but it has the mother in it, is what it'll say on the label. And then I do a half to a full teaspoon of colloidal silver. Colloidal silver can mimic an antibiotic, so it's an antibacterial, can help kind of clean things out. I notice everything kind of dries up. For me, getting on an antibiotic is the last thing that I want to do, truthfully. Not that I'm going to push it to the point where it's unsafe for me to not get on something a little bit stronger, but I've noticed that when I do this, have been able to fend off really feeling miserable. I think, there's influenza A, influenza B, all these things that might be going around, maybe COVID, whatever. But I don't go in, haven't gone in to the doctor for a very, very long time, because I feel like when I just treat it at home, I maybe even would miss the window if I did go into the doctor, because I tend to have to feel pretty miserable before I do that. So that's just kind of how I view it. I've found some things, there goes the voice, I found some things that have worked that have been more homeopathic remedies, and that has seemed to be really helpful, especially supplementing with vitamin D in the winter. Eating warm foods, drinking warm drinks. I actually made myself a latte this morning and did a drop of a food grade peppermint essential oil. And it's a little stingy, but it's good because I'm not a tea drinker, but it gives me that peppermint that I need to kind of soothe my throat, like I said, and kind of clear things up. So outside of that, have been doing very well. I had a client ask me, she's like, how have you been feeling? I'm like, I've had the most mild pregnancy, so blessed to be able to say that, but now I'm getting sick. And, I think what is hard about that is there's so many herbs and so many supplements that I gave Nathan to kind of get over what he was kind of congested and very similar to what I have. So I did turkey tail, and we did some oregano oil, vitamin D, magnesium. I just kind of loaded them up. But a lot of those things, when you look at the research, there is no research basically on any herbs because they're not approved by the FDA. So they can't make any claims about them. But even just the safety of them during pregnancy, if you look up colloidal silver, you're going to get all the dirt and terrible things are going to be said about colloidal silver because it shouldn't be trusted because it's not approved by the FDA, yada, yada. Well, I think that is frustrating because there has been no effort to have research behind those things. And even like oregano oil, I was going to take that because that's great for immunity. And you can buy it in like little droppers and just take that up to, I think it was 700 milligrams. I shouldn't even be giving you an amount, but if you look it up online, you can find the dosage for just daily immunity. It's also great for parasites too. I've had a client take that when I looked at their labs and that came up outside of the point. But when it comes to oregano oil, if you look it up, it's like it's not safe for consumption if you're pregnant. Same with echinacea and all these herbs that I would tend to gravitate towards because I know that they're great for immunity, helping your body get over things. But I just don't want to risk it. And I know sometimes, there's, I'm sure, resources out there, but I think it's been frustrating to get sick during pregnancy, not because I'm worried about my pregnancy or anything like that, but more so because I feel like my options are almost very, very limited to what I can take and feel comfortable taking. And a lot of that just comes down to research. So I did an herbalism course that would have been in April. And I was actually reflecting on the 24 things I've learned in 2024, which I'm going to release on next week's episode, which will be the final episode of season 1, which I kind of realized I'm like, this podcast has been going on season 1 for the last year and a half, but it's fine. We're just going to go with it. I think the new year is a good chance to start season 2, and I'm going to take a couple week break in between Christmas and then the beginning of the new year because we're headed to Hawaii with my family, and I just really, really want to be present, be 100% disconnected while we're there. And then we'll come back with season 2 and I'll become a mother in 2025. It just feels kind of, I don't know, like a natural progression into season 2. But as I was thinking about the things I've learned coming back to this in 2024, I'm going to do a whole episode on the 24 things, but I forgot that I took an herbalism course this year. And I'm like, okay, something that I really learned about myself is that I want to be a lifelong learner. And I think that is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. And that's kind of what I'm going to touch on today. We're talking about how we cope. So what are you avoiding by staying busy, how you're ignoring the issue, and then kind of touching into maybe what you've been praised for throughout your whole life that leads you to gravitate towards these things when you're overwhelmed or stressed. And I think that was a conversation and something that really came up on Sunday after I listened to our pastor. Nathan and I stayed at home. I woke up and like the whole side of my face was swollen. I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling super great. I just slept more. And then we watched church online. But he was talking about the things that we use to cope and how we try to always find an answer to who am I? And I think when we think about that, like ask yourself, who am I? And when we really think about it, it's like, I have no idea. Like we chase things and we chase success and we chase opportunities and we chase and chase and chase. And then when we get to what we thought we wanted for so long, it's gone. And or it's not even gone. It's more so it's just like, well, we got here. Now what's next? Like how often do we not sit in that moment of realizing like, I worked for a year and a half. I worked for 5 years. I worked for 10 years to get to this point in my career. Or I, was single for so long just to get to the point where I had a loving relationship. I got married and now we're jumping right to having kids. Or, it's like, how often do we just sit in the window of like, I just wanted to be married and wanted to have a spouse. And now we want the next. We want the next, the next, the next. And I think it creates such an unsatisfied culture. I'm so guilty of it. I can't even tell you what goals I set for myself this last year because if I would have met them, I probably skipped right past them and it wasn't enough for me in the moment. And I think that's something about myself that I really dislike, but I know it's pretty common across the board for us to react that way. So Pastor Mark, he was talking about that, when our life is trending, maybe it's trending up or we have those peaks and those valleys. That doesn't always mean that things are going right? Things can trend up, but that doesn't mean that we always feel really good about where we're at, what we're doing. And so it leads us to ask this question, who am I? And he had said, he's like, only Jesus can answer. And I wrote this down in my notes. It's like only Jesus can answer. You are a child of God. You matter to the Almighty. That's who you are. That's what matters. And I get goosebumps when I say that because I think we're so eager to crave the things of this world that can bring us value and make us understand who we are. It's why self-help books, especially this time of the year, are off the charts because we're all looking for an answer to a question that we probably already know. And when you sit with it and you're like, actually give yourself the chance to think about the answer you're looking to find, I would almost guarantee you always have it, or maybe you don't have it, and that's when you need to lean into your relationship with God. I was super blessed to get to spend time with my friend Lyndon this last Thursday, and I think a lot of this is coming from that conversation as well, because we were just talking about busyness, and she recorded an episode. She has a podcast called The Testimony, and it was called Boycotting Business. An incredible episode, and it was so nice to be able to have a in real time conversation with her around it. But I was talking to her too. I'm like, how do you not feel like so stressed about the financial side of not being busy? Like, to me, when I hear somebody is boycotting busyness, it means they're just gonna sit around and not do much and wait for whatever to happen. And that's not in any sense of the word what she implied or what I think of her for being not busy. But for me, that's where I feel really uncomfortable. When I hear not being busy, it makes me panic a little bit. And it makes me think, well, what am I then if I'm not busy? And it really stresses me out. And she was, I just love to be able to bounce ideas off of her and thoughts off of her, because I was also talking about how from March until sometime in June, I'm trying not to push myself to overcommit to anything too much in June, but knowing that I will hopefully deliver our baby in March. If not, it'd be way too late or way too early. But hopefully March is that time frame where I can take time off, and I'll have about 9 weeks where I'm going to be 100% disconnected, not responding to people, not opening I probably will end up opening social media, but I really just want to savor that time to do nothing. But that terrifies me, the thought of doing nothing. Even thinking of all the prep work that I'm doing now to make sure that when March comes, I'm prepared to have clients move into an independent phase of their program, so then in June we can pick back up with coaching, or maybe they'll feel so independent that in June they're good to go, but it's like all these things that I'm like racking my brain trying to think about. Even in January, I'm launching my final round of my Inflame to Inspired program, which I'm not sharing a lot on that yet because there's too much going on before the first of the year, and I don't want people to be focused on what they can do to improve their life by January 1st, because I'm so much more about the long-term sustainable habits, so that'll be coming late January. But even with that, like, okay, I'm going to add in a whole new program. It's not new. It's one I've run in the past, but I'm running a program and the end date will be March 2nd. Like, how close am I going to cut it? And it's because I have that addiction almost. And I know addiction is a really intense word, but to being busy, to feeling like I'm contributing financially to a relationship. And Lyndon had asked me, she's like, what is like the deeper meaning? Like, what is behind that? Like, why do you feel like you need to always be contributing and need to, even in a financial way? And I think very vulnerably and very openly to share with you, it comes from a place of wanting to know that people care about what I'm doing. Like wanting to feel like there's significance behind what I'm doing. And to me, that doesn't mean I want your money. I want your interest. And I think that's where it's like an exchange of energy. Like, you invest in me, I invest so much into you. And when there is that kind of emotional and energetic exchange, that is what is fulfilling to me. It's not the money piece. And I grew up in a family where luckily that's not something I ever really needed to worry about, is the financial piece. I wasn't working a job all throughout high school or all throughout college. I did some kind of like odd end jobs because I wanted to, but not because it was like I needed to make X amount of money to pay for college. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But I think the weight of money doesn't maybe carry the same weight of money as it does to other people. It's not because I want to have all these things and be able to live this crazy life and buy everything. It's because I just want people to care. And I think how I feel like people care is by that investment piece. And so when I think about entering into March, where I'm going to have a few months where I'm not really doing anything and financially not really contributing, because when you have a business, unless you have automatic things in place, like you don't make money if you don't work. Like it's just how it is. And I know there's ways you can go about business, so that's different. But for me, that's what it is. I primarily do one-on-one coaching, one-on-one blood work sessions, or a group program, which is like twice a year. And so if I'm not working, I'm not financially contributing. And I think that's something that is very intimidating to me. And I know a lot of people say, well, when you enter into motherhood, like that's all that's going to matter to you. And I really do believe that's true. But I know that throughout my whole life, I've really have been praised for or complimented on being a hard worker. And I think this is how I cope. And I'm really just jumping into this episode, but I wanted to preface this as how we cope. I don't have any, not that I really have any, authority or experience to talk to more of like the alcohol or drug addictions that people cope with, although that's very real. I see probably more so social media, work, staying busy, going on vacations, distracting yourself, or avoiding the topic in general as ways that people cope. I'm not more so talking about the substances that might be abused and how we use those to cope. I'm thinking more of that emotional piece and tools that we're using to actively avoid what's happening in front of us. And I think for me, when there are things or feelings maybe that I want to avoid, it comes with busying myself and overcommitting myself. And that's something I feel like I've gotten a lot better with over time. And I'm just going to speak to my own personal experience because, like I said, I don't really have the position to speak to how maybe you cope with things, but hopefully through just sharing my experience, you also can relate, or maybe you recognize something in your own self about my story. But when it comes to coping, or when it comes to avoiding, I keep myself busy. So I create long to-do lists where I know I won't get everything done, but having the stress of a to-do list makes me feel like I'm doing something. It's very confusing because it's like, why would you create a to-do list with, 15 things on it today, when in reality, you're only going to be able to do 5 of them? Or when in reality, you may be like, so for example, today I have a 45-minute window between coaching calls. Well, coaching calls tend to go a little bit over because I just love the people that I'm working with and I love talking to them. And so calls tend to usually go a little bit over that time. And so I'm like, realistically, Bailey, you probably will have like 25 minutes. So why are you scheduling in a 30-minute walk and then taking an additional 15 minutes to check up on some blood work that you were waiting to get results for? And it's like creating all of these things to fill in the day when it's just going to create more stress. But as somebody who probably has more of those chronic stress patterns, and it's almost hypocritical because I work with clients on this all the time, and it's boundaries that I've actively worked to set for myself and boundaries that I've gotten a lot better at setting for myself. But it doesn't mean that I'm perfect in any sense. Obviously, I'm going to be very transparent. I do still create very, very long to-do lists when I know I won't get everything done. And I think where my boundary has been created is the time that I spend either on social media. That boundary has been created, especially in the morning. I try to not get on any sort of social media until about 9 a.m. Not perfect at that, and I know that still is pretty early, but I'll open up Instagram and then I turn my phone off again. But another boundary is saying no to things and not feeling guilty about it. In the past, and I think this comes when you grow up in a maybe smaller community, I was involved in everything growing up: music, band, sports, track, basketball. I did volleyball for a year, dance. Like I was involved in almost everything that I could have been involved in. And I learned really quickly that I did enjoy being involved, but it was exhausting, but it was an exhaustion that you couldn't not have. Like, you weren't just not going to show up to your basketball game because you were tired. Like, no, sorry, you had to be at school by 7 o'clock a.m. that morning, and then you didn't leave until 9:30 or 10 p.m. Like, that's just how it was. And your body, I guess for me, I feel like my body became very resilient to that. I feel like I was able to, I feel like I was maybe sick all the time, but I did enjoy it. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong about that, but it does just create that desire to always be busy because you've always had every second of your day filled. So then when I got to college, I felt like if I wasn't doing something or wasn't stressing myself out over studying or staying up super late to study just because the people around me were, then I wasn't really doing anything. And so again, it was that like need to be busy for really no reason, right? In college, my responsibilities were significantly less. And then as I moved into getting married, so Nate and I got married in 2021. I'm really bad with dates. In 2021, I really didn't have a job after I graduated college. I was kind of in this like lull phase. I thought that I would go to OT school and then I was going to apply for OT school. Then I decided I didn't really want to. So then I still did apply and got accepted and did all the tours and everything and decided it wasn't for me after working in the field for a year because I was going to take a gap year or just kind of a year off before I started working in an occupation, hopefully, that I thought would be my long-term, lifelong job. And so for that summer, we got engaged April, May. Again, guys, I'm so bad with dates. Nathan's going to be quaking, but sometime in April or May. And then we got married 4 months after that. I do believe it was April. We got married 4 months after that. And then so married in August. And then I didn't have a job that whole summer. I just planned a wedding, lived at home with my parents for the most part, taught dance choreography, did odd end things to make some money, but didn't have a stable job out of college. And I remember feeling so stressed and anxious because I didn't feel like I was contributing anything. And especially when we entered into marriage, living in a different city and not having a job. Like, you guys, I signed up to do DoorDash. I did that one time. It was awful, awful, awful. I will never do it again. I had to go to this neighborhood in Omaha, and there were these people that were doing drugs and making loud noises. And then I delivered it to their neighbor, who was the sweet little lady with a cat. And I'm like, this is not the experience I need. And I don't know why I'm doing this, but it was that addiction to being busy. I remember walking around, this only happened once, and then my family's like, yeah, Bailey, I don't know if that's the most safe thing for you to be doing. We live downtown Omaha, and I made little care packages to give to homeless people downtown Omaha. So I was just like walking around during the day, and if they would be sleeping, I would just set it by them. I took some of Nathan because his family, apparently, like when he grew up, they would stock up on everything. So he had so many deodorants that were just underneath the sink in our bathroom. So I put one of those in a bag and some granola bars and an apple and an orange and some maybe toothbrushes. I don't even know, just little care packages. And I just brought them to people. And I was so proud of myself. I'm like, man, this feels so good to give back and to do something with my time, because I was kind of in between wanting to work or knowing what I wanted to do. And my family's like, Bailey, I think maybe let's not do that again, because you just don't know what could happen. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I probably shouldn't have done that. But again, it was like that need to fill my time, that need to do something. That was also when I went through that period where I thought that I had leaky gut because I was so stressed all the time and I didn't enjoy the lull of working. I really didn't feel like I had a lot of direction out of college. I graduated in 3 years. So to me, I felt like this year was, that year after college was kind of like a let's figure it out moment for me. But again, like I pushed myself to graduate in 3 years. So I took 18 credits both summers of college and 11 credits during the winter courses. Like I think as I'm talking, there are patterns where I have always been doing and not satisfied with not doing. And that has just been how I've coped with things. Even when I felt like I had leaky gut or all these, I'm like, maybe I have irritable bowel syndrome. And I look back, I'm like, no, Bailey, you were chronically stressing yourself out because you didn't have a job and you felt like you were worthless for not having a job. And it's really sad because I think I would have enjoyed that moment a lot, or those moments a lot more, if I would have had that more futuristic approach of like, but this is what you want to do, or this is where you're going to go next. And that's really when I entered into the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, got certified as an integrative health coach, and I feel like my life kind of did a 180. And a big piece of that is they make you think about stress, and they also have you learn about the impact that stress has on your body, the amount of inflammation that shows up as a result of stress. Stress leads to inflammation. Inflammation is the source of all disease. So we can see where that pattern is going to be not effective, right? If we continue to stay there. If you continue to work at a job that makes you absolutely miserable and stressed every single day of your life, yeah, there's probably a reason you have gut issues, or you're in a marriage that maybe is very, very high stress, or your partner hasn't dealt with their stress. There's probably a reason you have gut issues. Like, it's things like that lead us to feel the way we do, because we maybe aren't taking responsibility for the stress that it's having on us, or we're not communicating it with the people around us that something needs to change, that something needs to be worked through with somebody else, or maybe even on your own. So I say all of this just to kind of give you an overview of it has been a lifelong thing for me to cope with my emotions by busying myself. And when I don't busy myself, then I start to feel the adverse effects of that, and I get very, very stressed as a result, and then I notice I have stomach issues. And I'm so grateful that that has not been the case for years now. I would say that was very prominent probably that first year of marriage, and then outside of that, I really feel like I found ways to slow down. When you're actively working with people to slow down and reduce stress, there are just tactics that you learn to use. For me, deep breathing has been really helpful, just to take that full belly breath for 4 counts and then exhale for 6 counts. That is probably my favorite go-to, and it's really insane. I say this all the time. It's a free resource, but until you know about it, you don't know about it. And when you start to implement it and you notice how much better you feel, it's pretty incredible. And it sounds silly that breath work really does that for us, but it does. That would be a huge tool for me. Another thing would be getting outside, maybe spending time in my kitchen, making food, spending time with people that fill my cup, don't drain me, right? Those are things that I gravitate towards. Spending time with my husband, turning off the TV, reading. I have modalities that I've implemented, but I would say typically those are implemented after I'm done working for the day. So it's almost like this high stress peak. I try to do a lot, overcommit myself to my own work, not necessarily not really in response to what other people are asking for me or of me, but more so just what I expect of myself. And then when the evening comes, that is when I really, really try to wind down and turn off my phone, which I think is another piece of that, is how we like to cope with stress, is scrolling on social media. I even think there's something that's been really freeing of when I enter into a space, not being on my phone, or not feeling like if I'm not on my phone, I look really lame. I think sometimes we do that to ourselves, where when we walk into a public setting, if we're not with somebody or if we're waiting for someone, we want to scroll on our phone because it makes us look maybe important, or it makes us look busy. In reality, I think it looks kind of sad. And this is me saying this because I know I've been there and I've done that. It looks sad when you walk into a place and you notice people hover, and they kind of their shoulders come forward and they hover and they just look into their phone and they try to look like they're doing something. I mean, sometimes, yes, people are doing something, but I think for me, it's been really freeing to walk into a space, have my phone in my bag and not open it up, not feel the need to look at it, and recognizing that you look so much more confident when you enter into a space and you don't have a crutch to lean on, because you think you look unimportant, or you think you look unbusy, or you look silly. And that has relieved a lot of stress for me, honestly, because not picking up my phone or not using social media as a way to cope, it's really, really difficult, and boundaries have to be set around that. But I think that has helped me also not just numb and ignore the issue. I deleted TikTok probably, 2 months ago, Snapchat 2 months ago, and I don't miss any of that at all. Like, there's part of me that looks at people who have maybe gone viral on TikTok and it's like, oh, that's super cool. Maybe I should post videos on TikTok, or like, it's just all of these like very superficial things that in the grand scheme of life, like I don't really think would add value to my life. And I've just recognized that I feel so much better when I'm not using that as a tool. And when it is a tool, so for example, this happened probably a month ago on a Monday, I woke up and I was stressed. I don't even know what for, just like a subconscious stressed. And I didn't really identify where it was coming from, probably coming from a lack of preparation, but I woke up and just scrolled on my phone. And I'm like, I'm going to lay here for 30 minutes because I just want to brain numb, honestly. And I got up, and I'm telling you, that was the worst day I have had in a long time because everything just ticked me off. Like, I was so mad at the world. I was so discontent with my life. I was discontent with my body, was discontent with maybe financial circumstances, or like you just see all these people and they make you think that that is the most normal thing, is to be traveling and going on all these vacations and creating content and having that be your whole job. And it's like, it's not the reality for most people, truthfully. And so when we choose to consume content when we're already not feeling good, when we're already feeling low, and we consume content that is not energy giving, or maybe it is energy giving, but it's also overwhelming. Like, there's somebody that I love to follow, Brinley Joyner. I don't know if you know who that is. I love to follow her, and I think she's a ray of sunshine. If you don't know who she is more of like a wellness, health and wellness influencer content gal. I don't really know how else to explain her, but she also is a trainer on the app Form, which is the workout platform that I use. And she creates YouTube videos. Anyway, when I watch her content, I'm like, how? How do you do this all? Like, it stresses me out, and it's like, I don't even do a fraction of this. Like, how does she do this? How does she film her whole life? How does she, make such good meals? How does she make time to work out for an hour every day and do a sauna and a cold plunge? And like, it's very inspiring, but it also really stresses me out. And so even if content is energy giving, it can still stress you out. And I'm sure sometimes things I post stress people out because I do tend to make, even like when we think about food, like I try to make really good meals for every single meal with the exception of last night. Last night was a total disaster for a meal, but for the most part, I try to make really good meals, but I know that's not everybody's priority. And for some people, the thought of doing that might be totally stressful. So it's just finding ways outside of social media, because like I said, it could be energy giving or energy sucking. And the thing is you can't control what's going to come up on your phone, and you also can't always control how it's going to make you feel or how your body's going to respond to it. Some days I can watch content that is super upbeat and inspires me and I feel great and I'm motivated. And other days I'm like, I don't know how they do that. I'm super now overwhelmed because I'm not doing enough. What can I add to my to-do list? And I think that's, again, just how we avoid things, or even maybe how we force ourselves then to continue to stay busy because we see other people being busy. And like I had said when I had started this episode, for me, the thought of not being busy, the opposite of that is lazy. But that's not the case, right? And that takes a lot, and it will take a lot more of that like internal reflection for me to understand like, what is the benefit of not being busy? And how can I reframe my thinking process or my thought process into knowing and believing that not being busy does not mean you're lazy? And I wanted to kind of wrap up today's episode with ways that I was complimented as a kid even now. This is not any diss to people or coaches or parents or family members or friends around me in any sense, because I think the things that we're praised for as kids is really wonderful. But I've recognized that those patterns of needing to be busy are really a result of being praised for being such a hard worker. And I say that humbly. I don't say that. I truly do think I work very, very hard. That is something I can say about myself, and I hope that doesn't come across arrogantly. It's just something that I naturally do. It's not something where I feel like I've worked my whole life to be a hard worker. I feel like it was something that was honestly inherited to me from my parents. My parents are both very hardworking, and my grandparents are hardworking. Like I've grown up in an environment where working hard is just what you did. But I can also think back to moments when I would be laying on the couch after weights and, it's like, well, Bailey, you got to get up. You got to go do something. Like, you can't just lay on the couch all day. And yes, there's validity to that, right? Like, I think there are so many, for people that are not naturally maybe hard workers or can't see what needs to be done and do it, it's definitely something I think that you inherit. I don't think this is something you can obviously teach yourself and learn how to do this, but I think it's something that you just are gifted or given. And when you're not born with that, yes, you maybe need to be reminded like, hey, you need to go do something. You can't just sit around all day. But for people that just tend to gravitate towards overbooking themselves or doing too much or working super hard during the day, this is talking even outside of myself because I don't want to sound like prideful when I talk about this, but it's not really something then that you need to be reminded about because it stresses you out. Like for me, if I look at my schedule today, and I'm not going to recite my schedule to you today because you probably don't care and everybody's busy and everybody's doing 100 things, but almost every hour of my day is being filled with something. Either it's a client call, it's a mentor session, it is a birthday party, supper, like things that are all wonderful and I love, but like every single hour of my day today is committed to something. So for somebody to come in and be like, oh my gosh, Bailey, why are you sitting there on Instagram for 5 minutes? Like, you need to be doing something. That would stress me out because it's like, I'm already doing something. Like, I'm already doing so many things. And so just that reminder and that constant reminder to be busy when you already gravitate towards being overly busy, I don't think has ever been super helpful for me. And I think is when I grow to maybe resent something is when I'm being pushed to continue to work hard. And Nathan and I were talking about this after church actually, because again, our pastor was talking about like, what are the things that you have been, maybe praised for growing up, and how does that still show up for you? Like, is that still something you use to not feel like enough, right? And everybody's grown up in a different situation. I grew up with a wonderful family. I think for me though, what I got complimented on, like I said, was just being a hard worker. And I think that's, I don't know. It's hard because it's not a bad thing, but when I look at the patterns in my life, even when I worked at the hospital, I remember my boss telling me like, oh, you just work so hard. I wish we could just multiply you. And it's like, I appreciate that. Like, that's awesome. But that's also a lot of pressure because then it's always the expectation. Or when I worked at a coffee shop, it was like, oh my gosh, like you can tell that you own a business because you just work so hard. Like, you just see what needs to be done and you do it. And again, like, yeah, it's a good thing, but it's also kind of exhausting because you just hold yourself to that level all the time. And I've always expected that in myself. And I think something that I always kind of come back to is when I was, I don't know, probably in college. And I think this is why me maybe being unemployed for a period of time after college felt like such a disgrace, because my parents always were like, we never need to worry about you. Like, maybe, yeah, like your brother you have to worry about, which Trev, if you're listening, I promise maybe they didn't really say that, but that's my brother. But they were like, we just don't have to worry about you because you just do it. Like, we know we don't have to worry about you. Like, whatever you decide to do, it's going to work out because you just know how to work hard. And I really appreciate that. And those words mean a lot to me and they carry a lot of weight to me. But at the same time, then when I went through a period where I wasn't working, I think it was like my parents didn't think they had to worry about me. And now look at me, like I'm a disaster. I don't have a job. I don't know what I want to do. I graduated and they helped me pay for college, and then I'm not even using my degree. Like, all of these thoughts just creep in that make you think like, what is my value here? If I'm not being praised for being a hard worker, if I'm not being rewarded for being a hard worker financially, right? Getting jobs that paid me $10 an hour. It's like, okay, like what is hard working? Like what is the purpose of this if I work hard and I get paid literally nothing? Like I couldn't even live on this. Like if I was not married to my husband or didn't have a supportive family, like I wouldn't be able to live on my own. So like, what is the purpose of working hard? Or maybe now my family should be worried about me because I am a hard worker, but look at this, like it's a disaster. My life feels like a disaster. And I hope you've not found yourself in a season like that. I think for me, as I reflect back on it, it was probably, I don't know, I think it carried a lot more weight than maybe in the moment I even gave it. Again, saying like I really did have a lot of health issues come up during that time because I was just chronically stressed and chronically inflamed. I know I was not in the best headspace either. And I hope that you've not found yourself in that season. But if you have, or if you're maybe currently in that season, and I know this is a really sad and maybe dark thing to be talking about before we enter into the best time of the year, which is Christmas. But I also know there's a lot of heaviness that can come this time of the year. Maybe you don't know what you want to do career-wise, or there's something really difficult happening within your family or in your relationships, or there's things that you've not really maybe admitted to other people around you because you're still trying to process them on your own. It can be a heavy time of the year, especially when we're expected to be super happy. And I'm not coming from a place of like I'm still in that darkness, but I want you to know that if you do find yourself in that place, working through it in ways that feel comfortable sometimes is just how we cope as people, right? So maybe gravitating towards the social media or overworking or eating an abundance of food or drinking alcohol, like some of those ways are just how we cope naturally. But I also want you to know that that doesn't have to be the way that you cope forever or even temporarily, right? And I think for me, a big saving grace, honestly, was my husband in that time. To be married to him was a blessing because I have the rest of my life really to have his support, but especially in that year, like I had his support. And so clinging to those people that make you feel at ease, right? Who can provide some comfort, even if it's not verbally, if it's physically, they can just sit with you when you're going through these seasons. I mean, clinging to those people and finding who those people are, and ultimately focusing on your relationship with God and remembering the significance that you do have in this world, right? It's not something to just take lightly. When you continue to ask yourself that question of like, who am I? And I think, again, I found myself in many seasons of life where it's like, who am I? Even now, it's like in this in-between period of like, okay, I have a business and then I'm going to have a kid. And then what does that business look like? Like, who am I? And ultimately, like, you are a child of God. You matter to God, the Almighty. Like, that is all that you can ask of yourself. That's all that you can, that's really where you just need to sit, because it doesn't mean that you have to do all these things in order to gain the title of being a child of God, right? You don't have to overcommit yourself, overwork, have the most shiny, perfect looking life, have all these friends, have all this money, go on all these vacations, get all of this praise for what you're doing in order to fall into that category, because you were born into that. Like, before you were even born, you were a child of God. And I think that's where I want to find myself being more comfortable in how I cope with stress and how I even view slowing down, right? And changing the narrative that if I slow down, I'm going to be less valuable because I'm less of a hard worker. And really always coming back to what I say is that your productivity does not equal your value. Your productivity does not equal acceptance into heaven. Like, your productivity, yes, it's a tool, and we were created to work. And I think we find a lot of value in working or taking care of other people and fulfilling all these roles for our life. But ultimately, that is not your purpose, right? We all have that unique purpose that we were given to us by God to live out. It's not a job. It's not an amount of money. It's not a level of busyness. It's not, the list could go on, right? You don't need to do anything to earn the love of God, right? And so remembering your purpose is something you can live out every single day, and it's non-circumstantial, right? It doesn't mean you have to be making $100,000 a year to live out your purpose, right? It's just what you have been given. It's what you've been gifted with. It's those characteristics. Like I talk about, even myself, like being a hard worker, that is something I've been praised for my whole life, really. And I don't like the word praise necessarily, but complimented on my whole life. I wouldn't say that working hard is my purpose, because then when I maybe don't work hard, then I feel disconnected from my purpose. But there's characteristics within that, right? It's not just like the blanket statement, you work hard. It's more of like you see somebody who needs help and you help them. That's something I would say I probably do every single day, is I see somebody that needs help and I help them. And I think that is part of the purpose I've been given, is to have the awareness of what other people need, even sometimes more so than what I need myself. And this is getting into a whole new conversation, but really just sit with yourself. I would encourage you to sit with yourself in the next week and think about, first, what is your purpose, right? And second, like, what do you feel like you have to do every single day just to feel valuable? That's something that I'm really going to be sitting in for the next long while, probably, really for sure, until I take some time off from work, because I want to be able to enter into that season feeling gratitude for being in a situation that allows me to do that. Like, how ignorant for me to not be so grateful that I have the ability to spend as much time off as I want to with my child. Like, and it's when we get into our own head and we think, but I'm not going to be busy. I'm not going to have people that are maybe, like I talked about money before, energetically like exchanging like that financial gift to show me that they're interested in what I'm doing. Like, where does my value come from if people aren't showing interest in what I'm doing? And when it comes down to it, like, it's just not about us. And that takes kind of a hit, right? It's not about me. It's not about what I'm doing for these people. It's about me, probably more so, wanting to fulfill my purpose of seeing what they need and helping them and feeling like they value that. But at the end of the day, like, it's really not about me. And I think Lyndon really encouraged me to think about that too, of like, even when we help people in our profession and when we try to walk with them through their health conditions, it's not about us. Like, it's not about what I can do to heal them. It's about guiding them through the process of them healing themselves, or guiding them through the process of bringing God into the experience of them healing in that journey and what that journey can look like. So, gosh, it's it's very, very layered. And I know my thoughts might have been all over the place. I really didn't want to enter into this conversation with any notes or any guidelines, really just the inspiration that the sermon on Sunday had, really on this episode, and sharing very transparently about where I'm at and kind of how I am entering into this new year. I'm not really entering into it with all of these goals for myself, for all of these expectations for myself. I think, like every year, things are going to happen this year that are so different than anything I've ever experienced. Becoming a mom is going to be such a different experience that I don't want to have all these goals or expectations for myself around that, because I just genuinely don't know what to expect. But when you think about the new year, you're going to be bombarded with things and services and products, and I really don't want to be somebody who contributes to the noise. Like I had said, I'm running a program. Oh my gosh, my stuffy nose is driving me crazy. But I'm running a program, and that will be starting end of January. And I hate to contribute to the noise of like, you need to do this, this, and this to improve your life. I think if you're looking for sustained habits, a sustainable, health journey, or just something that can encourage you, I think that is when I would invite you to tap into whatever resource you think you need for that. But you really do not need everything under the sun to look a certain way this next year or to feel a certain way this next year. Because like I said, whatever you're searching for, you probably already know the answer, or you quite honestly maybe don't even want to know the answer. I was talking to someone recently who had broken up with someone, and they were like, my mom just didn't say any of the right things when I talked to her. And I'm like, well, when did you sit with your thoughts and think about what you want to hear, right? Because nobody around you is going to be able to say the right thing if there's an expectation or an assumption or already something that you want people to tell you. You probably already know for yourself what that is. And that comes to every self-help book. Although I love them, this time of the year, we are just bombarded. And I just want you to feel confident going into this next season, feeling like you don't just need, and that really spending time just asking yourself questions that maybe feel uncomfortable or that you tend to want to avoid, like, how are you coping? What are you actively avoiding right now? Probably more so, what are you avoiding? And then asking yourself, how are you coping with avoiding that? Or maybe even, are you ignoring the issue in a whole? Does it feel better to ignore the issue in a whole? Using those questions to guide you towards maybe what you do need in this new year. Because there is an energy that's coming up, and it is a time for change and a time to maybe do something different or push yourself a little bit harder, but it doesn't need to come at the sacrifice of your mental, emotional, physical well-being. And I really just wanted to leave you with that. Again, next week will be the final episode of season 1. So talking about the 24 things that I learned in 2024. Goodness, I'm going to need to sit with that for a while. I was thinking about that. I'm like, gosh, I don't really know if I've learned anything. And I know I have. Just need to have the right mindset and the right time to sit down and really reflect on that. So I will be doing that. I would encourage you to do the same. And I would love to hear what you've learned in this new year. Something I love about the podcast is hearing from you and what you're learning, what you are, kind of how you've evolved over the last year. Like, I would love to know. So send over to me, and maybe I'll even do that on Instagram in the little Nourish with Purpose group chat we've got there, is just, what have you learned in the last year? I'm so curious, and of course, I would love to know. But with that, let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you so much for today. Thank you for whoever is listening to today's episode, and that they are able to see maybe from a different perspective what they're going through right now. I pray for protection over their mind, body, and spirit as they think about what they're trying to actively avoid right now, or as they think through the ways that they are coping with what's happening around them or what's happening to them. And I ultimately pray that they feel comfort in whatever that is. I ask for safety over them as they travel during this holiday season, and that they just feel so uplifted and encouraged by the people around them during Christmas, and that they really just enjoy and savor that time with friends and family. Thank you so much for sending your son Jesus as a baby to truly just show us the gentleness of your spirit and just continue to remind us that you're here with us through it all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me most frequently over on Instagram at Nourished with Bailey. I am currently posting the 12 days of high protein anti-inflammatory recipes, so that has been really fun. The last one will be posted on Christmas, so just a lot of fun things happening over there. Otherwise, my email is in the description of today's episode. Reach out if you have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback. If you want to share with me what you've learned this last year, I would love to know. And Bailey Seaton on almost everything else. Of course, I'm sure you can find a way to connect with me if that is something you're looking to do. So with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. And before we get to next Wednesday, because it will be released on Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and enjoy all the time with friends and family. All right, I'll talk to you next week. Bye.